Hello everybody and welcome to this 3 Colors Up. In this one we're going to be tackling a couple of Renault FT tanks which have been 3D printed. You'll see those as part of our vlog for the Blood Valor game. So you'll know more information about those if you've seen that vlog. So what I've done in this video is do something a little bit different because the company or the guy that makes these STL files for printing gives you a complete vehicle and a damaged vehicle. I thought I would paint both. So this is a tutorial on showing painting one which is going to be used in-game as a functioning vehicle, and another one that can be used as an objective marker or a replacement for when you lose that vehicle during a game. So we paint the two of them and I show you the differences between how you make an active vehicle look a little cleaner and how you change the damaged one to make it look a little bit more, well, knocked out, essentially, just basically that. But it's a good little video. I've enjoyed this one quite a lot. A little bit unusual because I'm doing two at the same time, but hey, you learn production lining. Good job. So anyway, without further ado, let's get down to the table and let's paint them. So here we have our two Renault FTs, and we're going to begin, well, we're going to talk about the priming step here first. So we have our destroyed one, which has been primed in Chaos Black. And we have our active one, which has been primed in grey Seer. There's reasoning for this beyond just the fact that the inner cavities need to be a dark colour when we come to paint the knocked out one. I kind of feel like I want this to look duller, whereas I want this one to look a little brighter and a bit more, you know, it's actually active, it's out, it's doing stuff. So there'll be a couple of steps between the vehicles to try and emphasise that point a little bit, build a bit of contrast between the two. However, for the most part, our base colours are going to be the same. So we're going to start with moving this to the side. And our first colour is going to be Vallejo model colour Khaki. This is going to be the base coat for both vehicles, and we're going to paint them both entirely in our khaki. So I'm going to put a good, yeah, that'll be enough to get started. And then I'm going to use a large base brush just to get that colour down. So we're not going to be very subtle with this, we're just going to go for it and just start applying it all over each model. Probably need a couple of coats for this, but we're going to do this, and then after that we can move on to outlining some of our camouflage. So we have our base coats down. They're probably not the tidiest of base coats, but I'm not too concerned about that. But what I do want to show here is the tonal difference between the two, the grey Seer priming and the black priming. And you get that duller, more drab look, while this one looks a bit brighter and a bit cleaner. So something to keep in mind if you're feeling like you want to do something similar, using these 3D prints and doing the same thing. Now we're going to move on to camouflage, and camouflage is going to consist of 3 colours, but I'm going to paint 2 of them off camera. So the first one I'm going to do is Vallejo model colour flat green, and the second colour is Vallejo model colour flat brown. We're going to be doing these in sort of large sort of patches that are going to go across the vehicle, sort of join up here and there across the vehicle, a bit of a patchwork kind of thing. But after that, we're then going to go in and do a little bit of black lining. I'm going to show that in the next stage. So for now, I'm just going to get stuck in, get some of my green out on the palette here, and select a decent brush for that. Make sure this one's working okay. I think so. Move our rack out of the way. And it's just going to be a case of finding a location where we want the colour to start. So let's say up here on the turret. And what I'm just doing is drawing in the shapes. We don't need to be too precise with this because our black line later on will tidy this up. So it's just a case of kind of working our way around. And just taking both these colours and doing a similar thing across both vehicles here at this point. So just, I want to see if I can at least get this one in Let's see how it looks. I know I'm putting maybe a bit too much paint down here, but it'll be fine. So you can see now we have our 2 tones of camouflage on. It's now time to add our third. And what I've tried to do is replicate the same pattern across both the vehicles. That way, if you feel like you're playing a game and you're running this and it gets knocked out, you can replace it with this. It won't look too dissimilar. I just thought it made sense to me, printing them out together like this. I think they should be the same vehicle, more or less. So, we're going to move on to our third camouflage, and for this we're going to be using Vallejo model color black grey. This is a very, very dark grey, and we're going to be using this for the lines between the camouflage, and this is what makes the French pattern interesting and challenging, to say the least. Definitely challenging. So what we want to do is to carefully outline the colors, particularly where they join like this, and outline that. Something like that. Now also they add little sort of thorn shapes, so occasionally we'll take the brush and add a little bit of a swoop into the main colors. So it's going to be a slow, careful process of just lining all the colors, and this is really what makes a French tank look like a French tank. Like the unusual schemes that they came up with during the First World War really gives you some interesting and unique styles. And it's just a case of replicating those as best as possible. So we're going to be going across both vehicles with our black grey and doing this as best we can. As you can see now, we're making a bit of progress. Our camouflage is now done, and we have still managed to maintain that contrast between the knocked out version and the active version. Everything looks a little cleaner on the active one, everything on the knocked out one looks a little rougher. And that's fine, because when we get to all the weathering step, that will appear a lot more wrecked than it currently does. So we have a couple more base coats that I want to apply. So the first one is going to be, let me see if I can find it. Yes, we're going to use Vallejo Panzer Aces. I'm going to move these to the side so I can show the bottle. Panzer Aces Dark Rust. This is going to be for the tracks on both tanks, as well as the exhaust on the back as well. The next one is going to be Vallejo model color German Camouflage Pale Brown. This is only for the shovel handle, which is there on the side. So, I mean, it's not, I'm mentioning it, but we don't necessarily need to worry about it that much. And I think, yeah, so those two colors are next. So it's really just the track, the exhaust, and the shovel, or the shovel handle. And I wanted to do dark rust because if I want to do some chipping later on, I'm going to use a different color for that. I think the dark rust is going to look fine as our track's color. So let's move our rack to the side, and we're just going to paint all this in. I think that's going to look all right. It's going to get dry brushed up as well. So let's do the exhaust before we move on. And it's just so that we're getting a little bit of contrast again between different colors, different parts of the vehicles, just as we move along. I reckon in reality these exhausts are probably black. They probably don't generate too much heat from them, these old engines. But never hurts to just add that in there anyway. So we'll get on with these two colors, and then when we come back we'll look at a little bit of dry brushing and make ourselves a little bit closer towards some weathering. So now that we have the tracks and the rest of the stuff all sort of base coat, that's our final base coat layer, we're going to be moving on to a little bit of paint chipping. And for the paint chipping, we're going to be using, let me just move these to the side, German Camouflage black brown. So this is the darkest brown that we have to use here. It should stand out nicely against everything else we've already done and will give us the first stage of our weathering. So what I'm going to be using is a little piece of foam from a blister or a box or something like that. And if you haven't done this before, what I tend to do is sort of roughen up one edge of that piece of sponge, and we have our paint down here already. And what we want to do is just dab with the sponge until we have the consistency that we want on the sponge. There's a little bit of black grey is just mixed in there too. That's all right, not worried about that. So on our active tank, it's going to be very light. And we're going to just focus on a few edges here and there. Keep it nice and simple. I'm not going to overdo it on this one at least. So just a few little bits on some edges here and there, just as a little bit of some visual interest. Nothing too bad. Go a little bit heavier on the trench slider, particularly on the edges there and on the underside, just to show it off a little bit more. Make that part of the tank look a bit more used, a bit more worn. And a little bit along our track, just to have a bit more heavy wear down there, because that's going to be more of the more common areas that the tank is going to have to be worn on. So just quite lightly along there, pick out a few of the bolts and the rivets and some of the edges, something like that. So I think really maybe beyond maybe a couple of other little scrapes here and there, that's all I want to do on the active one. However, on our other one, we're just going to go nuts. We're just going to press this on a lot more heavily and really wear the vehicle down. Make it look like it's really gone through the ringer. Sort of take a more of a no mercy approach to the amount of chipping that we do on this one, because that's going to make us hammer home that contrast between the active tank and the knocked out one. So we'll do it absolutely everywhere. Make it a lot heavier. And just work it into everywhere we can. This can be quite paint intensive as well, so be prepared to sometimes go through a lot of paint just to get the right amount on your sponge. But the more we do here on this vehicle, the more interesting it's going to look. Like so over the top of that cupola there. And that makes the vehicle look a heck of a lot more weathered already, just from that simple step. Now, the next thing we're going to do is move on to some silver. And for that, we're going to be using Vallejo Model Color Oily Steel. And we're going to need that to liven up some of the colors, like around the tracks and such. And we're going to be applying that as a sort of a dry brush. Again, we're not going to be going as heavy on the knocked out vehicle in certain locations, but on the tracks on our running vehicle, we're going to be going a little bit heavier. So I'm going to make sure that it's brush is ready. And for example, I've just knocked that over. Good job. So on this one, we're going to focus the silver mostly on the tracks. Sort of almost an overbrush with the amount of paint I'm using there. That's all right, that works. because the running tank is going to have a lot more silver focused on these areas of higher wear. And I think that's all the silver we're going to need for that vehicle. Back to our knocked out one. What I want to do is focus it more on where we have the hole in the turret. So we're going to do that just by lightly working around that edge, and we get a more interesting looking finish there. Go along the open driver's hatch. A little bit along the edge of this wheel. And then further back, anywhere else where there's a lot more of our darker chipping. Really hammer home that this thing has been through the war. Like so. Now on the tracks, yes, we're still going to do a bit of the silver, but we're not going to do it to the same extent. Just a little bit lighter. And the reason I'm doing this is to make the tank look a little bit more like it's been lying around for a bit longer since it got knocked out. You know, it's sort of been abandoned. Obviously it's been knocked out and then abandoned. And it's allowed time for the some of the metal parts maybe to start corroding. So we don't want to go completely over the top. But that should be enough for our two vehicles for now. So what we're going to do is let all this dry for a little bit, and then when we come back we're going to start looking at a couple of enamel washes. So having left the two to dry for a little bit just to make sure all our chipping and our silver and stuff have dried correctly, it's time to move on to our enamel washes, and we're going to be using two of them. So the first one is going to be our dark brown wash. This is from AK Interactive. You've seen me use this before probably, if you've seen a couple of 3CUs. So what we're going to be using this to do is basically shade both vehicles, and it's pretty simple to apply. We just need to throw it on and let it seep into all the nooks and crannies on the model. So both vehicles are going to get this, but when we come to remove it after it's dry, or move it around once it is dry, we're going to be leaving more of it on the knocked out vehicle than we are on our active one. So we're going to be cleaning this one up a lot more than the knocked out vehicle. That'll help increase that contrast between the vehicle that's fine and the vehicle that's really not. So it's just going to be a case of applying all this all over the model. There will be areas that when we come to remove it, it won't be easy to reach, but that doesn't matter because we can still just leave it there as extra dirt and whatnot. Okay, so that's the wash on that one. It looks terrible, I know, but that's okay, don't worry about it. So we'll put that away for the moment. And the other one we're going to do is some AK Interactive Fresh Mud. This is primarily going to be going onto the tracks and the running gear. And I haven't used this in a while, so it's a little bit messy. Make sure that we have it. And then what we're going to do on the running vehicle is basically apply it quite liberally to our tracks and to our lower running gear. So all down here in behind the track sections as well. Just to have that build-up of dirt. And we'll make sure that we have plenty to apply. We want the active vehicle to have more mud on it than the other one, just to show it's actually doing stuff, it's actually been moving around. And hopefully when all this dries, we'll be able to remove it in such a way that we can retain a lot of that. So with all the washes now down and settled, they're not completely dry, but that's fine. We can move on as it is. We're going to start removing and moving around some of our products. And for that, I'm going to be using some AK odorless thinner. This is for their Enamel range, which works well for this. It shouldn't interfere with any of the acrylics that we've put down. And what I'm doing is taking the brush that I applied the washes with, which is like an old dry brush, dampening it, only dampening with the thinners. And then what we're going to be doing is, if we start with our active tank, is start to work the wash off again. So we want to clean it away from the larger areas of the model. And you can see how quick that color is coming back. And what this is doing is letting the wash move into the smaller details, so any crevices and stuff like that, but it's also letting us clean the vehicle up to a point where I think we'd be happy with it, or I'd be happy with it. So it's really a case of just working on the model until there's enough of the wash back off it again that we think, yes, that's enough. We don't need to do any more than that. Also remember, because you're picking all this material back off with a damp brush, you're going to have to rinse it a couple of times just to make sure we're getting everything off of it that we want. Now, because of the tracks and the nature of the mud wash that I've put on as well, I don't want to just remove all of it off again. So what we're doing is working on the hull first, getting the worst of it off there, definitely more so off the upper surfaces, because I don't mind it gathering in the lower parts of the vehicle. Let it move around as much as we want there. So on our tracks and stuff like that, we're going to take more off the brush and make it a bit drier. And we're just going to wipe the track sections. That starts to bring our silver back through again. And then on the sides, just do a little bit. It's almost like dry brushing again, but instead of applying stuff, we're removing stuff. So let that mud just do what it wants to do. Let it streak. Let it look a little bit more messy. And then on the tracks again, just make sure to just give it a wipe, so that we're getting that silver back through again. And then up here, we can just move around to make sure that we've got as much off of it as we want. What we could also do on the tracks as well is just take your finger and just wipe over that upper surface. And that sort of acts to clean away the mud from certain areas there. It makes it look a bit more apparent. We can also do that on the side, which does make it quite messy, but you know what? It's more fun. It's more fun that way. I quite like that. So again, on this side, just make sure we're removing what we want. And I think that is a little bit more off here and there. Give us a few clean panels and at least just to show off the color scheme, the camouflage a bit. And I think once that is dry and varnished, that'll be done. So we'll move that to the side and we'll bring in our wrecked one. So for the wrecked vehicle, it's going to be much the same process, although I'm going to be a little bit more liberal with the application of the thinners. And instead of wiping it off the vehicle, I want to sort of dab over the vehicle. And what this is allowing it to do is to create a more natural looking application. So it's a bit more messy, but it's done in such a way that it doesn't look like it's just been brushed on. It's going to, with the thinner, it's going to move around and gather a little bit more in places that I want it to. A bit more haphazard looking as well, I think. It's also going to pull away from some of our silver chipping as well, and just overall should look a bit more interesting. We'll pull it away from those hatches, accentuate that detail a little bit more. Pull it away from the hole in the turret. Move some off the turret, I think, as well. But overall, we're just going to be dabbing it around, letting the stuff move in a more natural way. That way we're keeping this nice contrast between our active vehicle and our knocked out one. And I think even if we just wipe a little bit there along that edge, bring some of that silver back through, not too much. I think we're on to a winner. So our final step will be to give both of our vehicles a matte varnish, and once they have a matte varnish, we'll see them in all their finished glory, and you can let me know what you think. And here we are with the matte varnish all done, everything dry. We now have our two FT tanks ready for the table, and I have to admit, I really do like the look of them. I like that we've managed to maintain that contrast between the active tank and the knocked out one. I like that the knocked out one has quite a bit of character, and that's down to the 3D print file as well as the method of painting it. And in general, both these models look great to me. Like these are, I'm more than happy to have these down on a tabletop for Blood and Valor or anything else really. But all in all, I think they've turned out really nice. I think they're both very unique in their own ways, yet still trying to be the same tank, only, you know, before and after kind of thing. But I hope you've enjoyed watching this one. It's been a bit of a different format trying to do two of the same vehicle here, and I think it's worked pretty well. At least I hope it has, and you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. But I think in general, we've managed to pull this one off quite well. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave your comments down below. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and see you again very soon.